"We need younger talent who'll work for half your salary," Mark said, eyes cold as steel. I swallowed hard, nodded, and clutched the flash drive that held my entire life's work. "My name is Eric Dawson. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 2 decades I was the systems architect, the fixer, the silent guardian behind the glass walls of Halcyon Tech Solutions. I wasn't the guy with the flashy presentations or the corporate jargon. I was the one who stayed late on weekends, skipped vacations, and missed family birthdays to make sure our systems didn't collapse under the weight of their own ambition. They called me old school, like it was an insult. But old school built this place. When I started, Halcyon was a scrappy, mid-sized IT consultancy, barely keeping the lights on. We were running on outdated servers and more hope than actual infrastructure. I spent sleepless nights writing code, building proprietary systems from scratch when there wasn't budget for off-the-shelf solutions. My wife Allison used to leave me dinner in Tupperware, with little notes like, "Come home soon. We miss you." That was before the cancer took her, and work became my anchor in the storm. Every line of code, every firewall configuration, every redundant backup, it all carried my signature. Not for credit, but because someone had to make sure it worked. Over the years, CEOs came and went, each promising innovation and disruption. But they didn't know the systems. They didn't know how, when the network went down in 2009, it was me who rerouted traffic manually for 36 hours straight. Or that when a client's data breach threatened to bankrupt us in 2013, it was my encrypted protocols that saved the day. But none of that mattered in that glass conference room last Friday. Mark, 38, MBA, the new COO with his tailored suits and buzzwords, leaned back in his chair and told me, "It's just cost efficiency, Eric. We can get 2 juniors for your salary." He didn't even look me in the eye. I glanced. At the window where the skyline I'd watched grow for 2 decades now looked distant, like a place I didn't belong anymore. I thought about my daughter Emily finishing her engineering degree this year, how I'd always told her, loyalty matters. Funny how the world doesn't think so anymore. I didn't argue, didn't remind them about the server architecture, only I truly understood, or the undocumented admin protocols I designed during those long, quiet nights after Allison passed. I just nodded, packed up my things, and quietly slipped the flash drive, 3 terabytes of encrypted system, documentation, into my jacket pocket. Not for revenge, not yet, just because someone should keep it safe. They thought they were replacing a salary. They didn't realize they were losing the foundation. When I first walked through Halcyon's doors, we didn't even have a proper server room, just a cramped closet with tangled cables and a dusty tower that overheated every other week. Back then, there were only a dozen of us huddled around battered desks, chasing small contracts, praying for clients to pay their invoices on time. But we made it work. I architected the first scalable system that allowed us to onboard multiple clients simultaneously, eliminating the bottlenecks that had nearly sunk us in those early years. By the time we closed our first $1 million deal, I was configuring redundant cloud backups, ensuring we'd never again lose a project to hardware failure. We grew together, from that converted office above a bakery to the sleek downtown building. With glass walls and an open floor plan, Halcyon became a name in the industry. But something shifted along the way. It stopped being about people. Stopped being about the late nights spent eating pizza on the floor, laughing about how we made it. It became about quarterly reports, margins, and efficiencies. And somewhere in that shift, I became expendable. The signs were all there, but when you've given 20 years of your life to a place, you convince yourself it's just a phase. It started small. My office, once near the executive wing, was moved temporarily to a corner near the server room. They said it made sense, given my technical focus. I didn't argue. I kept showing up early, kept staying late like always. Then the new hires arrived, fresh out of college, brimming with certifications but no battlefield experience. They filled the open plan office with talk of agile frameworks and blockchain. Integrations on all buzzwords, no substance. I trained them, of course. Taught them how to navigate the legacy systems I had designed. systems with layers of complexity they couldn't even begin to understand. But soon, I wasn't being invited to the strategic meetings anymore. Projects I used to lead were suddenly reassigned. My name quietly disappeared from email threads. Even the interns stopped coming to me with questions. They were told to take it up with the new team. One afternoon, I walked into the server room to find two of the juniors attempting to patch a vulnerability I'd flagged weeks earlier. They didn't even know about the secondary firewall I had implemented to prevent exactly that scenario. "Didn't you read the documentation?" I asked, knowing full well there was none. They'd never approved the budget for it. They just shrugged, muttering something about how Mark said I'd be transitioning out soon anyway. That was the moment I knew. Not just that my time at Halcyon was ending, but that the systems I had built, the ones they depended on, were now in hands that had no idea what they were really holding. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. After I left, they didn't even bother to call. For years, I'd been the first number dialed when the network hiccuped or when a system crashed in the middle of the night. But now, radio silence. They were too proud, too convinced, that the new blood had everything under control, but the systems didn't care about pride. Barely 3 weeks after my exit, the first outage hit. A critical client portal went down for 17 hours, costing them nearly $300,000 in penalties. I watched it unfold from the comfort of my living room, sipping coffee, my inbox quietly filling with desperate LinkedIn messages from former colleagues. "Hey, Eric, do you remember how the payment gateway redundancy was configured? Eric, there's an issue with the load balancer. We can't find the admin credentials." Of course they couldn't. What they didn't know was that the very redundancies and security layers they were now tripping over had been custom built by me, without formal documentation, after years of patching and protecting the system from behind the scenes. Mark even emailed me once, short and curt, "Would you be open to consulting?" I didn't respond. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about watching a machine sputter without the mechanic who'd kept it running for 2 decades, and I knew. The real collapse was only just beginning. It was a Tuesday morning. When the call came, "Eric Dawson?" The voice was firm but warm. "My name's Laura Benton, CTO at Nexora Systems. We've been following your work for years." At first, I thought it was another recruiter fishing in the wake of Halcyon's implosion. But Laura wasn't like the others. She knew things, not just my public achievements, but the invisible architecture, the integrations, the security frameworks that no one outside a core few at Halcyon had ever understood. "We've been picking up some of Halcyon's former clients," she said casually. "They're dissatisfied." I smiled. Of course they were. They mentioned your name, repeatedly. Laura didn't dance around it. She offered me a role, senior systems strategist, double my previous salary, flexible hours, a team of seasoned engineers at my disposal, and most importantly, respect. For a moment, I hesitated. Not out of loyalty. That had been severed long ago. But because part of me wondered if I was ready to start again. Then I thought of Mark. Of that glass office, his smug smile, his corporate jargon about younger, cheaper talent, and of the flash drive still sitting in my desk drawer. "I'm in," I told her. By the time we finalized the contract, Halcyon was on its 3rd major system outage. Clients were abandoning ship, vendors were pulling support contracts, the new hires were scrambling, patching holes they didn't even know existed, and then Mark called. Not an email this time, not a LinkedIn message. A real call at 9:17 p.m. on a Thursday night. "Eric, look, we need your help." There it was, the panic he'd kept hidden behind corporate polish. "There are issues with the data migration. We're losing clients. The team's struggling." For a second, I just listened to the silence that followed. The heavy, desperate breath he didn't know I could hear. "I appreciate the call, Mark," I said, steady as ever. "But I'm unavailable." Click. No anger. No satisfaction. Just clarity. By Monday, the industry news had broken. Halcyon lost its largest client to Nexora, my first assignment in the new role. Sitting in my new office, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, I opened the flash drive one. Last time. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to remember every line of code, every late night, every sacrifice, and how it all led me here. They thought they could replace me with someone younger, cheaper, faster, but they didn't. Understand, you don't replace the foundation, you rebuild over the ruins. By the time the fiscal quarter closed, Halcyon Tech Solutions was in freefall. The trade publications called it an unforeseen systems failure. Clients called it a disaster. I just called it predictable. The junior engineers they'd hired to replace me? Most had already left, burned out or scapegoated for the outages they couldn't possibly have prevented. Vendors cut ties. Data breaches were rumored but never officially confirmed, though based on the frantic calls from former colleagues, I had my suspicions, and then came the legal threats. A letter, hand-delivered to my new office. Cease and desist. Immediate termination of all use of proprietary knowledge and systems architecture belonging to Halcyon Tech Solutions. I laughed, actually laughed, reading it in my glass-walled office at Nexora. They were accusing me of using my own designs. Designs I had built independently, often off the clock, undocumented and unsanctioned by them for over a decade. Designs they never even tried to understand. My attorney, a sharp, meticulous woman named Caroline, drafted a response so cold and precise it could have frozen a server room. Mr. Dawson's systems architecture was neither documented nor licensed by Halcyon Tech Solutions. Any proprietary claims are unfounded. Further correspondence should be directed to legal. I never heard from them again, but I did hear about them. The CFO resigned under pressure. Mark was transitioned out in what the press politely called an executive realignment. Halcyon's market share plummeted. Clients migrated en masse, many to Nexora, where I now led a team that actually valued the experience behind the code. One of my former colleagues, Jenna, messaged me late one night. They're trying to sell the company. Pennies on the dollar. I stared at the message for a long time. 20 years of my life. Reduced to a bargain bin acquisition. But I wasn't angry. No gloating. No satisfaction in their downfall. Just a quiet understanding of a simple truth. When you cut out the foundation to save costs, the building always collapses. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place 6 months later. I was in a conference room at Nexora, leading a strategy session on our latest client integration when Laura, our CTO, knocked quietly and handed me a folder. Thought you'd want to see this. Inside, an investigative report commissioned by one of Halcyon's former major clients. The firm had hired a private cybersecurity consultancy to perform a forensic audit after the collapse. The findings: intentional mismanagement, executive-level negligence, suppression of internal risk assessments, including ones I had personally submitted, flagged, and escalated during my final years there. There it was, in black and white. Internal warnings regarding system vulnerabilities were systematically ignored or dismissed by senior leadership, prioritizing short-term profitability over infrastructure stability. My name appeared multiple times in the report. Systems architect Eric Dawson repeatedly advised against proposed cost-cutting measures, citing security risks. The same measures Mark and his executive team had greenlit, directly leading to the cascading failures that sank the company. For a long moment, I just stared at the pages, not out of surprise, but out of quiet vindication. They hadn't just fired me. They had silenced me, stripped me of my voice in decisions that compromised everything I'd spent 20 years building. And when it all crumbled, they tried to pin it on the system, not on the architects of their own recklessness. Later that week, an industry magazine published an exposé titled "The Fall of Halcyon: How Arrogance and Austerity Killed a Tech Giant." It made the rounds fast. LinkedIn, Twitter, all the trade forums. My inbox flooded with messages from former clients, colleagues, even competitors. You tried to warn them. We should have listened. You deserved better. But the one that stuck with me came from Jenna. my old teammate who had managed to escape just before the collapse. You weren't just the backbone, Eric. You were the conscience. That hit differently because it wasn't just about the code, the systems, or the infrastructure. It was about integrity. All those nights alone in the server room, running diagnostics, patching vulnerabilities, designing redundancies no one ever asked for. They weren't for the company. They were for the people who depended on those systems, for the clients who trusted us, for the employees who deserved a stable foundation. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not the title they stripped from, not the office they took away, not the salary they replaced with 2 cheaper hires, but the undeniable proof, now public, now permanent, that I was right. Not out of ego, but out of principle. And that, more than anything, when it was my real revenge. Starting over at Nexora wasn't just a new job. It was liberation. No more glass offices where decisions were made behind closed doors. No more corporate doublespeak about efficiency while quietly dismantling the very systems that held everything together. Here, my voice mattered. On my first day, Laura didn't just introduce me as our new senior systems strategist. She said, "Eric's here to teach us how to build things that last." That stuck with me, because that was all I'd ever wanted. Not recognition, not titles, not bonuses, just to be part of something built with care, resilience, and integrity. Nexora, I led the development of a new infrastructure framework, one that didn't cut corners, didn't prioritize speed over stability. We held brainstorming sessions where even the newest engineers were encouraged to question designs, suggest improvements, and I insisted on one thing above all else: documentation. Every line of code, every system protocol, meticulously logged, versioned, accessible. "We don't hide knowledge here," I told my team one afternoon as we mapped out a redundancy protocol on the whiteboard. "We share it. We protect each other." That ethos started to ripple through the company culture. Turnover dropped. System uptime hit record levels. Clients noticed. Within a year, Nexora didn't just recover the clients Halcyon had lost. We surpassed their previous market share. Our reputation became one of reliability, not just innovation. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a tech conference, something I'd always avoided before. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, young engineers, CTOs, entrepreneurs, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was shaping an industry. After my talk, a junior engineer approached me, nervous but determined. "Mr. Hey, Dawson, how did you get through it? After everything they did to you?" I smiled, shook his hand. "By remembering that systems can collapse, but character doesn't." And that's what I carried forward. Not bitterness, not revenge, but a quiet, steady commitment to building things, teams, systems, cultures, that could stand the test of time, because I knew, better than most, that strength isn't in the walls you build around yourself. It's in the foundations you lay for others to stand on. It was an early Thursday morning when Laura knocked on my office door, a knowing smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Got a minute?" She handed me a thick dossier, the Nexora, logo embossed in silver. "We're acquiring Halcyon's remaining assets." I stared at the folder, letting the weight of those words settle in. The company that had discarded me, now a relic being absorbed by the one that had embraced me. Laura sat down across from me, leaning in. "We want you to oversee the integration." I looked at her, measured, calm. "You're asking me to lead the dismantling of the systems I built?" She didn't flinch. "We're asking you to lead the reconstruction, to decide what stays and what gets left behind." For a long moment I said nothing, fingers tracing the edges of the dossier. The old me, the one still raw from that conference room humiliation, might have seen this as poetic justice. But now, it felt different. This wasn't about revenge. This was about responsibility. "I'll do it," I said finally, "but on one condition." Laura raised an eyebrow. "My team runs it. No shortcuts. No consultants who only care about trimming costs. We rebuild this the right way, with transparency, with stability, With respect for the people who'll depend on these systems, she smiled wide. That's exactly why I'm asking you. And just like that, I found myself walking through Halcyon's familiar halls again. But this time, not as the expendable systems architect, quietly phased, out for being too expensive. This time I was the architect of the transition itself. Employees who had once averted their eyes when I left now approached me with cautious relief. Eric, is it true? You're leading the integration? I just nodded. No gloating, no smug speeches. Just a simple truth: I was back. But not for them, not for revenge, for the systems, for the people, for the work. Because some things are bigger than pride, some things are worth doing right, even when no one's watching. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stepped into the building I once called home. Same glass facade, same revolving doors, same sterile lobby where, not too long ago, I'd walked out carrying a cardboard box and a flash drive. But everything felt smaller now. I scanned my new security badge at the turnstile, a subtle but undeniable shift. No longer Eric Dawson, Systems Architect. Now, Director of Infrastructure Integration. No need for fanfare. No need for grand announcements. Just quiet, steady presence. I rode the elevator up to the executive floor, passing familiar faces along the way. People who once couldn't meet my gaze now offering polite, even respectful. Some of them looked relieved, some embarrassed, most just grateful that someone capable was finally at the helm. The office they'd assigned me wasn't the corner suite Mark used to occupy. I didn't want that. I chose a workspace near the integration team, surrounded by engineers, analysts, and project managers. No barriers, no pretense, just the work. From my desk, I could see the server room through the glass partition, the same one I'd spent countless nights in, long before most of these employees even knew what Halcyon was. One afternoon, Jenna, my old teammate, popped her head in. "Never thought I'd see you back here," she said, smiling. "Me neither," I replied, leaning back in my chair. But here we are. And that was it. No speech, no, "I told you so." Just the simple satisfaction of knowing that in the end, time rewards those who build with integrity. While others chase titles, bonuses, and short-term wins, I built something that lasted. And now, I was back. Not as a relic of the past, but as the architect of the future. These days, I spend less time writing code and more time teaching others how to do it right. Every Monday morning, I lead a mentorship session for the new engineers, not just about systems architecture, but about something more important: responsibility. Anyone can write code, I tell them, but not everyone can build something that lasts. I see flashes of my younger self in some of them, eager, restless, thinking the latest framework or shortcut will solve everything. So I teach them what no certification ever will: that real systems are built with patience. That leadership is about protecting those who depend on your work, even when they don't know it. That legacy isn't the title on your business card, it's the strength of what you leave behind. And as I watch them grow, challenge me, improve on the very systems I once built, I know I've done my part, not just to rebuild what was lost, but to lay foundations that will outlast us all. I never needed to shout my worth, didn't need to post about it or demand recognition. The truth is simple: the value you build, in systems, in people, in legacy, doesn't need to be announced, it just endures.